Hi, I'm Rodney Evans. I'm a partner at The Ready, and I'm here today to talk to you about the future of HR, more specifically about a concept that we call org debt. Since last fall, we've been in dialogue with over 100 HR leaders, and we keep hearing the same thing. There's no time to be strategic. One chief people officer told us she had to give up 70% of her role in order to focus on anything she considered high value to the business. There are tons of reasons for this, from unreasonable CEOs to pandemic stealing focus, but there's also something less obvious, but even more destructive at play beneath the surface. So, where are we going to find that capacity to get after what's most important? First, we have to understand where HR's time and attention is going right now. And we have to understand this concept of organizational debt. The way that a lot of people teams work right now is like paying interest on a loan. You're not making a dent in the principal. You're not getting at what's most important. You're just servicing and upholding what came before. This has to change. We're all familiar with financial debt, and a lot of us also understand technical debt. This is the interest paid on a loan or the old code that needs to be refactored. Anything that doesn't serve us can be debt, and the interest that we often pay is in frustration and limited potential. There's a third kind of debt, though, that's a lot more pervasive and expensive than the other two, and it's called organizational debt. It's all of the practices, processes, and rules that no longer serve us, but that we haven't invested in changing. Organizational debt is all around us. It can come in the form of increased controls that are meant to mitigate risk, but ultimately just add bloat. It can come from lack of constraint, where reinventing the wheel is common and the environment feels too chaotic. In either case, org debt tends to grow or compound over time. It's generally no one's job to pay it down, and usually it is holding HR back from doing the most important work of the business. Org debt keeps really talented people working the system rather than reinventing the system to serve the employees. Let's look at a simple example from one of our clients. Imagine that a bank teller makes a mistake on a form and it costs the bank branch $10,000. In response to the mistake, the teller's manager institutes a four eyes check so that he has to check the form every time it's completed. If 10 tellers fill out the form 10 times every day, that's 500 forms a week that the manager has to check. At about $150,000 in annual salary, that form checking is costing you 40 grand a year in the manager's time. If that policy isn't revisited for 5 years, and if we're being honest with ourselves, it probably won't be, that adds up to $200,000 in manager compensation to save a $10,000 mistake that may or may not have been repeated. Chances are you're looking at this slide and you are seeing your own company in these examples. There are so many bank forms bouncing around organizations, and it is our job just to think of them as ways to free up money and working hours to redirect. There is usually a lot of org debt hiding in the people ops function, practices and mindsets that are upheld and invested in long after they've stopped providing value to the business. Take performance management, for example. Only 14% of employees say it inspires them to improve. And in about a third of cases, traditional performance management processes make performance worse. Yet, in a 10,000 person organization, about $16 million dollars on average is spent annually to complete this process that doesn't do what it's meant to do. Org debt looks like this, and it lurks in the way we've always done things, but is the easiest and the most effective way to unearth capacity that's hiding in plain sight and find efficiency. So, where does org debt start? Well, humans have a need for autonomy, connection, and safety in our lives. Work is no different. And when one of those needs is unmet or feels like it's in peril, human emotion results. Here's the link to the larger system. When those emotions remain subconscious, they can lead to a desire to either control or avoid the trigger. Imagine a leader that feels out of control. Maybe it's that bank manager whose employee made a $10,000 mistake that they had to take the blame for. That manager's unmet need for control might express itself in the form of bureaucracy, adding a rule or a role for everything. Over time and at scale, this leads to a culture where no one feels like they can act without permission, and an overall pattern of apathy and stuckness among the people working in that org, which unfortunately comes right back to the leader having unmet needs. It feels like no one will step up and they are the only one who can control the environment. On the other hand, an unmet need for control can lead us to a different form of org debt entirely, one where we're hesitant to commit or to drive clarity so that everybody has to look to us. Imagine that same bank manager refusing to clarify what the bank teller actually can approve or decide, what forms they can fill out and submit, so that he reserves the right to kind of swoop in whenever he wants to. That creates an influence culture where everyone is always checking in with those who feel like they have the authority. And over time and at scale, we get an inefficient system where everybody is highly dependent on a couple of heroes. The leader is back to an unmet need, this time burned out and wondering why he has to do everything. This is the org debt cycle, and most teams and whole organizations, even, are just moving through it, swinging back from one side to the other as they react to triggers in the environment. Our job is to look for where things are over constrained, leading to bureaucracy and learned helplessness, or where they're under constrained, leading to chaos and politicking. People functions have to begin to recognize this cycle and create, retire, or change the constraints rather than just staying in the doom loop. Why? Because it's expensive and it holds us back from doing the best work of our lives. Brilliant, innovative colleagues end up being unthinking automatons. According to Gary Hamel and Michele Zanini, org debt costs about $3.4 trillion annually in the US alone. That's $9 trillion globally. So if we're wondering where increased efficiency or increased growth went, I think we have our answer. Org debt isn't really anybody's job, but the work of the people team can and should be to start chipping away at over a century of org debt. We're counting on you, and we're here to help. Thanks for listening. And if you want to hear more, email us at fohr@theready.com.